once you get to that small group, it's like, what more can you say about him? Like,
I just don't think he has it anymore.
Melo's the role he didn't want in Oklahoma.
Carmelo Anthony throws it straight away.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Control the Narrative, a podcast where we control the narrative that the media creates. If you're new around here, subscribe to catch our weekly podcast. And if you're a subscriber, a returner, or better yet, a member of Control the Narrative, we appreciate your attention as always. This is now my fourth time doing this intro, and just a very celebratory episode tonight. Carmelo Anthony last night, we're recording this on Tuesday, May 4th, cracked the top 10 scoring list of all time. We knew this was coming. We knew that this was inevitable once he got back into the league and he signed with Portland again. But there was a time where we didn't know if this was going to happen, when he was out of the league for a year, when he was being blackballed, when he was being marginalized in Houston, and just all these different things. So want to congratulate Carmelo Anthony if you're watching this podcast on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts on an amazing feat. Only 9 players in NBA history have scored more points than this man. So if you haven't already, it's time to put some respect on Carmelo Anthony's name as an all-time great scorer, an all-time great player, because to do something that only 9 other people in the game's history have done, I don't care how long you play, it's pretty incredible. So going to start the podcast off like that. And we are going to bring back a Control the Narrative member and my guy, Evan. Evan, what's going on, bro?
hey man, it's great to be here, especially after yesterday and like Melo being such an important part of my life. It's really awesome to be here after becoming the 10th highest scorer in NBA history.
It was an incredible moment, man. I was watching the shit on League Pass, and like we knew it was coming. It was 9 points away, and like with this Blazers team, like we didn't really know if he was going to get it, not because he was going to go 0 for 10 or whatever, but if he was going to get the shots. He came out and got it in the first quarter or the early second. I'm pretty sure early second.
It was early second.
Early second quarter. He started 4 for 4 from the field. It was an and 1-3. So
over Gallinari.
Amazing. Evan, what does him moving into the top 10 all time mean for you as a fan and just watching this guy for so many years?
Well, I think it's just such a statistical artifact that you can't debate. When people are shit talking Melo like they love doing, when they're just trying to just make those little arguments of why he's not a good, like there are 9 players in the world who've scored more points than him in the NBA, and soon to be 8. And it's like, once you get to that small group, it's like, what more can you say about him? Like, it's so rewarding as such a big fan of him to just be able to say that he's in the top 10 now.
Yeah. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with the whole, like, what else can they say thing. I made a video today that we dropped this morning on Control the Narrative, Instagram and Twitter, where it's like a little voiceover and we put some highlights and shit like that. But really now people have said so many things. Obviously, Carmelo has never won a championship. His shooting percentages aren't high enough. He can't play defense and all this shit. And at the end of the day, yes, a championship would be great if he is a contributor on a team that wins a championship. That's the goal at the end of the day. But for him to be top 10 all time, we're not talking about like a top 15 score, a top 20 score, a top 30, 40, 50. You know, I remember ESPN or one of these outlets came out a report, a list, like maybe, I don't know, a year ago, where there was like top 100 players in NBA history or top 50, and Melo wasn't in the top 50. So
you can't do that anymore.
You can't do that anymore. And like to tell somebody who's in the top 10 scores of all time, like, nah, you're not a top 50 player of all time because of his defense, or because
how can you justify that? Is your defense? You'd think, being for not knowing anything, if you were told that this top 10 scorer is not a top 50 player, you'd think that they would not even be able to like defend a brick wall.
Yeah. A parked car, which is the craziest part. And like we say this every few weeks, we're not sitting here and saying he's an amazing defender. We're saying that he's not as bad as people have said he was and is even today. No championships. How many All-Star teammates has he played with? 1 in New York. I'm pretty sure 2 in Denver.
Tyson Chandler for being the one. I mean,
and Tyson Chandler being that one, exactly. So, there's just so many things that went wrong in Melo's career in terms of teams and decisions, and Melo's admitted it. Like, he shouldn't have signed that extension with Denver. He should have went to Chicago, or I don't think he said he should have went to Chicago, but
he was gonna.
He was gonna go to Chicago, and like, who knows what would have happened there. So I just think, like, what does moving into the top 10 all time mean to me? It means that, like, nobody can tell me shit now. Me, like, Steven Tsakanikas, a Carmelo Anthony fan, you can't tell me shit about, oh, Melo this, Melo that. Like, he's a fucking top 10 scorer of all time, and nobody can ever take that away from him.
Exactly.
So it was, I'm sure it felt amazing for Melo, but it also felt just as good to me. And I shared this with the Control the Narrative members in the Discord just now, and I figured I will tell the viewers or the listeners on the podcast, because it's something that, like, it's not about bragging or anything like that, but it's something that if you watch all 6+ minutes so far, or 5+, because I fucked up a few times in the beginning. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you really fuck with us. You really fuck with the mission. So I DM'd the video this morning that I made talking about Melo, how he's now immortalized. That's, I think, a really good word to describe this whole situation, because you can't say anything now. So it's like, congrats, bro. This whole chapter has been so inspirational. Shit like that. And he said, keep going. They can't stop what's meant to be. It was written. So I just think that whole idea that this was inevitable, that, like, they tried holding him out and it didn't work, and he came back and helped Portland last year, is helping Portland this year, and just climbed into the top 10, which is really, like, immortal territory. Like, 9 players in history have done what Carmelo Anthony has done. And when you read those names, Shaq, Kobe, Jordan, Kareem, Karl Malone, all these names, it's like, yeah, I didn't want to say his name, but yeah, we'll
my bad.
go ahead.
I think another thing it means is, like, I feel like how people introduce Melo now, when you hear them talk about him, they say future Hall of Famer. This is a tier beyond future Hall of Famer now, because how many guys do you have in the Hall of Fame? There's a decent amount, and there's again 9 players who have scored more than him, a top 10 scorer of all time, and in a couple podcasts we'll be saying 8 players in front of him too.
I hope so.
It's just another rank on the ladder that he's crossed.
How bad is it that I think of that sometimes? Like, when I used to volunteer for the Camp Mellows, they always used to introduce him every single summer, be like, oh, at that point, like, a 6-time All-Star, 2013 scoring champ, 2003 NCAA champion, and all this shit. And, like, now you can add a top 10 score in NBA history, which just, it takes it up another notch. And
resume building.
Exactly. So I love that. All right, let's talk about some Blazers, specifically Robert Covington, Derrick Jones Jr., and Carmelo Anthony in this front court. Obviously, to start the year, Terry Stotts went with Derrick Jones Jr. at the 3, Robert Covington at the 4. Since they traded for Powell, they've been starting Powell alongside CJ and Dame. Derrick Jones Jr. has picked up a lot of DNP CDs. He hasn't even been playing a single minute in a lot of these games. Covington has been on the bench for a decent amount of games lately in favor of Carmelo Anthony. So just this whole situation from where we were to beginning the season to where they are now, what do you think of the current situation of the Blazers front court?
I think it makes absolutely no sense, and it's really clear that the Blazers and Terry Stotts have no idea of what direction they're even aiming for.
Yeah,
it's so confusing to even analyze just as, like, a fan, because you have them saying their emphasis on defense this year, because I guess they clearly showed towards the end of last year, and everyone came back, that they were, like, a competitive team, and I guess they could, like, score the best. They're, like, the best offensive team, but, like, this season, to be competitive, we gotta play defense. So they start Covington and Derrick Jones. it was clear to me that Derrick Jones Jr. is the best defender on the team. Like he's a better defender than Covington. Do you agree? Like I think straight up.
I think they're very different. Like obviously Derrick Jones is like way more athletic, but like overall, I feel like in the passing lanes and just like IQ wise, I feel like Covington's probably better. But
I think it's also Derrick Jones is probably better against like smaller players.
Yeah,
a lot lighter. But I regardless, I don't think there's a huge discrepancy between them, and the way they now bench Derrick Jones and play Covington the entire first quarter, like a lot of minutes. He's most games, like when they're not playing Melo, Covington plays up to like 38 minutes a game, and like he's not producing on offense. Like you sent in the Discord the other day, like the last 13 games, he's shooting like 35% from the field and like under like around 30% from three. Like that lack of offensive like contribution, first of all, doesn't even like override like what Melo's been doing on offense. Like Covington's not stopping enough guys to make up for what Melo can give you on offense.
Yep.
And then Norman Powell, this is what I'm saying. It's so confusing to analyze because it's just like you're not even comparing two things. It's just like a circle of like madness. Norman Powell, like come playoff time, if they're matched up against the Lakers and you have your 3-guard lineup, what Norman Powell is supposed to guard playoff LeBron. And I'm not saying Melo is going to do a great job on LeBron, but like at that point, if you're so intent on defense, then you should be playing like Covington and Derrick Jones. Like that's what I'm saying. It's just, to me, it doesn't make any sense. So if you want to help me try to unravel it.
I'm with you and like it not making a lot of sense. I feel like what they were doing, and like some people have said this on Twitter, is like they were playing contracts and not players. So for Derrick Jones Jr., they paid him $9 million a year. So not necessarily that they had to start him, but like they had to play him. They had to find a role for him, and they figured, all right, well, let's try to put him in the starting lineup. Obviously, Melo's getting paid the veterans minimum. I think it's like $2.6 million or something like that. So I felt like what they were doing is playing contracts, and it wasn't working. Obviously, it still isn't working. And it's just so funny how, yeah, their whole emphasis was on defense, and like they are historically bad this year on defense. Like forget about being the worst team defensively this year. I think I mentioned it last week. There was some stat that I saw on Twitter. I'm going to try to find it and maybe I'll retweet it or something, but they are the fourth worst defensive team in history, according to like one stat, and it's some advanced analytics bullshit. So not going to give it too much credit, but just watching the fucking game, it's really bad how bad they are defensively. So this whole situation of Derrick Jones getting 0 minutes, I don't mind it. But what doesn't make sense to me is when they're preaching defense and then they're starting Dame, CJ, and Norman Powell. And like people have talked about Norman Powell's defense. I don't think he's a bad defender, but at the same time, I don't think he's as good of a defender as people are saying he is. I feel like people are hyping him up for whatever reason, that Norman Powell is this not lockdown defender, but he's this really good defender. And like he's made some good defensive plays, steals, and shit like that. But at the end of the day, like Derrick Jones Jr. is a better defender than him. So that doesn't go with their talk about, yeah, all we care about is defense. Like, no, you don't care only about defense. So like play Melo. Fuck it. Take out Covington in the starting lineup and put Melo in. Just go offense. Like just Dame, CJ, Norman, Melo, and Nurk. And like that's not a good defensive team. We know that. But also Covington in the starting lineup instead of Melo is also not a good defensive team. So it's like try something.
I was going to say, like you're the worst defense in the league, like with Covington playing all those minutes. Right. Clearly he's not like holding down like the fort or anything.
Right.
And also I think what I've learned being an NBA fan for so many years, I think defense, like these players, it's really narrative based, like everyone's saying about Melo. Like these comment sections, like I always just go through the Portland comment sections because I just want to see what people have to say. I'm curious. And there's obviously the people like us, and there's just like comments with hundreds of likes. They're like, play Melo, start Melo. And then there are people like Carmelo can't like the park car. Carmelo can't even stop a park car. And it's like you don't even watch the games at that point. Like you've just heard it for all these years.
Yeah.
And same like Norman Powell. That's what when he was coming over, I heard the same thing. Like he's like an improved defender. When we all saw Gary Trent, he was a good defender. So I didn't really get it. It's never stuck out to me. Like he's not a bad defender, but I've never watched a Blazers game and be like that Norman Powell really could stop it. Yeah.
Fair. And again, Covington shot last night 3 for 7, the night before 3 for 6, and the game before 2 for 3. So he has been shooting better, but like he went through a stretch where he was shooting like below 30% from 3 and like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 games. Before these last 3 games, he was shooting 29.5% from 3, 34.2 from the field. So, like, obviously, he's a good 3-point shooter. He was going through a slump, and he was bound to turn it around, and it seems like he has over the past few games. But he's not Carmelo Anthony,
of course.
Just
and Carmelo, the last few games, he's been shooting like 50% from 3.
Exactly.
So.
The last like 13 or some shit like that.
Yeah, exactly. More than a few.
Been balling out too.
And I think it goes back to what you were saying. I never even thought about that. Like, but playing the contracts, like I think with Norman Powell too. Like, if you have a game. It seems like Covington is who they're willing to take out if Melo's playing well. But I can just see come playoff time, if Covington and Melo are both in a game and they're on, the two of them, they'd feel the need to sub Norman Powell in.
One of them's coming out.
And one of them would have to come out, even if it would be better to leave Norman Powell out. Like, it's one thing, Damian Lillard, even if he's 0 for 20, you play at the end of the game. You're Damian Lillard. But I think that goes only to Lillard and I guess at this point CJ, no matter how much I can't stand to watch him not pass to Melo.
Bro, he's been bad lately with that shit.
Yeah.
So the playoffs are coming up. We'll get into the playoff opponents in a minute. But as of right now, the Blazers are the only team in the league without fans in the arena. Dame tweeted about it. I think CJ said something today too. They haven't had a good home record this year, and I definitely should have looked this up before I asked you this question, what their home record is versus their away record is. But let me see if I can find it real quick because this is pretty important to this question. And they don't have fans. Every other team in the NBA has fans. At some capacity, like the Knicks have 10. I think it's going up to 25% soon. Right now, they're 6. The Blazers are 16-16 at home and 20-13 on the road. Obviously, you're supposed to play better at home. So, what impact, if any at all, do you think not having fans in the arena have on this team?
I definitely think fans influence defense a lot more than offense, and that would obviously help Portland because, like we said, defense 80% of the time is effort based. It really comes down to just like giving it your all. And we talked about that like on the last time I was on here about like the exchange of energy for defense or offense. Like they put in so much energy coming off the ball, Dame trying to get open, CJ dribbling for 20 seconds in the shot clock to get a shot.
People love that, by the way.
Yeah. But it takes a lot out of you. And I think mentally, if you have fans cheering you on, that could give you an extra boost, which, I mean, for the games they've lost over the last, a few games ago, they lost a lot by like 1 or 2 points. And I don't know, if you get a few more stops with a little more energy, like these things add up. So on the defensive side, I think it makes a big difference. Offensively, I don't think fans are taking away CJ McCollum's ego to dribble till the end of the shot clock. I mean, I don't really think it makes that big a difference in offense.
Yeah, it's a great point. I didn't even think about like the whole, it impacts defense more than offense. For me, the way I'm looking at it is like in the playoffs, even if it's 10%, I went to a Knicks game a few weeks ago when they played the Grizzlies and they won in overtime, and 10% of MSG, and MSG is different. Knicks fans are different. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking about it in the playoffs, and if they don't have anybody, it's the same thing like the bubble. Like, I don't play in the NBA. I don't know what it's like to play in the regular season versus the playoffs. But from what players say and from what you can just observe, fans make a huge difference, especially in the playoffs. So that's where my mind goes. And I guess where I'm like a little worried when, let's just say the Blazers get matched up with the Jazz. I'm just making this up for now. The Jazz have like, I think 25 to 30% of people, maybe even 50. They have a decent amount of people in their stands. The Blazers have 0. So obviously, when you go to Utah, those fans are crazy. We all know about their fans. And when you go to Portland, it's not a home court advantage. And winning one in Utah is going to be really hard. But coming back and Utah winning one game in Portland where it feels like a neutral site, besides like the traveling and shit like that, won't be as tough. So that's the one thing that worries me. I think they're going to feel it in the playoffs more than anything. And like, I'm sure they could tell when they go to other cities and other teams right now. And like, they were in Brooklyn on Friday and like Melo got love from the crowd and shit like that. So they miss fans. And I'm worried about what it could do negatively for them in the playoffs if they get there.
At this point, yeah.
Speaking of playoffs, we have, I think it's like 8 games left where they're coming down to the end of the season. 7?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Oh yeah, 7 games left. And right now it's pretty much a lock that the Blazers are going to be either 5, 6, 7, 8. They might get in the play-in tournament, but either way, they're going to face one of these 4 teams in the first round. And like, let's say they do get the 7 seed, they're going to get in the play-in tournament. There's no way that they're going to lose that 2 games in a row, or maybe if they're the 8 seed. Yeah, actually, they would still have to lose 2 games in a row. Jazz, Suns, Nuggets, Clippers are the top 4 seeds in the West. They will be the top 4 seeds in some order. Can you rank those 4 teams in terms of who you'd most rather the Blazers face versus the team you'd least rather they face?
I think most want to face definitely Denver. Next,
you cut out a little there. You said you most want to face Denver.
And I'd go Denver, Phoenix, Utah, LA.
Denver, Phoenix, Utah, LA.
I see that because I think, and Stephen A. Smith says this a lot, like the great thing that he loves about basketball is that the best team always wins in a best of 4 series with basketball. And it comes down to talent. So I'm really, for the most part, in the playoffs. So Denver, no Jamal Murray. Obviously, you have like the MVP, but he's kind of like a Giannis type MVP, as in Nikola Jokic isn't going to be taking over games in the playoffs. You know what I mean? If you need, I mean, he obviously scores a lot. Like he's made a lot of like game winners, but like lockdown defense, like you're getting double teamed. He's not like the go-to guy to like get a shot, like compared to like a Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Devin Booker type player. You know what I mean? So I think, and then without Jamal Murray, it's going to be the least big a challenge for Portland. Then I guess we get to Phoenix. I think they're the second least talented with, obviously they have a great system going, but I mean, if Devin Booker is not hitting his shots, I mean, you never know. And then obviously it gets tougher. Utah, they have a great system and they scare me. And then Clippers, they're stacked.
Fair. I almost agree with you. I think Denver, obviously, Jamal Murray going out was a huge blow to them. And they've been winning games, but I don't know if they can sustain that. Jokic is good. Not the real Denver 15, as we all know, but he's really good. And we're not saying that they suck. We're saying that out of these 4 teams, they're the one we want to face the most. We're the least scared of.
Of course.
So I'm still going Denver. I'd rather face the most if I'm the Blazers. 2, I actually disagree. I think that I'd rather play the Jazz than the Suns. The Jazz, like, obviously they're fucking killing it this year. I just don't trust them in the playoffs. Donovan Mitchell is a baller. Rudy Gobert is a beast. defensively, and they do have a good system. They do have great role players and all that. And they've been fucking up the Blazers when they played them this year. I think they won by like 30 opening night, and I remember the last game. I'm pretty sure the Jazz blew the Blazers.
I just don't think they're a great matchup for the Blazers.
They're not. They're not a great matchup. But more than that, I just feel like the Suns, they have Chris Paul. And Chris Paul hasn't been to an NBA Finals like Carmelo Anthony. But at the end of the day, he is made for the playoffs. And I just hopped on Above the Rim podcast yesterday, and we were talking about this. And, I was like, yo, I don't know about Devin Booker. He's never played in a playing game. This is his 5th or 6th year. Like, who knows how he's going to play? But his style fits playoff basketball.
I completely agree.
He can get his own shot. He can score in isolation. He knows when the defenses load up on him. And, obviously teams will make adjustments and things like that. But I feel like he is going to have a coming out party, a breakout party in this playoffs. Him with CP, DeAndre Ayton, we'll see how he plays. But I really, really like the Suns team. I don't know if they'll go all the way or even to the finals or whatever the case is, but I just think they are really, really scary. And I'm just more scared of them than Utah. And then I agree with you. I think the Clippers, we can make fun of them last year for blowing that lead against the Nuggets. We can crack jokes about Paul George. I talk all the time about how I think he's been overrated for years now. But at the end of the day, I thought the Clippers were going to win it all last year, heading into the bubble, just because
I think most people did.
Yeah, Kawhi is just on a different level. Paul George, I hate to say it, has been balling out this year. He's been shutting a lot of people up, and it doesn't really matter until the playoffs, because if he turns back into playoff P, like we know he can, or what were people saying? Piss off P or way off P and all this shit. Just fucking amazing memes came out of that shit. So that could happen again. But I just think that Clippers team is fucking stacked. They have Tyronn Lue, who seems like he's doing a hell of a job this year. And they're the 4th seed, I think, right now. But I feel like seeds don't really matter that much when you have Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and all the guys that they have. So
Rondo, he's always
yes, Rondo is a huge addition to them. I think Luke Kennard is a little underrated. We know Beverly; they have a good fucking team.
Marcus Morris, he was averaging
Marcus
20.
Morris. They have a good fucking team, man, and I still think they're the favorite. I don't care if they're the 4th seed. I still think they are the favorite to come out of the West.
Healthy Lakers, you choose them?
Say that again?
You choose them over the healthy Lakers?
It's so hard right now because all the shit coming out of LeBron's mouth is that he's not going to be healthy ever again. He's complaining. It seems like he's already accepted the fate of the Lakers this year.
Making excuses, the plan.
He's already making excuses. So I'm I don't know if the Lakers will be what they were last year, unless the refs helped them out again like they did last year against the Blazers in that first round. But yeah, I think the Clippers are the team to beat in the West right now. And obviously it's wide open. It could be Phoenix. It could be Utah. I was gonna say as a joke it could be Portland, but I can't even say that with a straight face right now. So
they're hard to watch.
They're very hard to watch. So I'm gonna go those 4 in that order. I'd rather they play Denver, then Utah, then Phoenix, and I want them to play the Clippers the least. But either way, man, 4 good teams.
For the Suns, I hear a lot of people talking about Chris Paul should be in the playoff race. Or sorry, MVP race. Yeah. And I wonder your opinion. Who do you think is more valuable, Devin Booker? Who would you, if you had to take off one, Devin Booker or Chris Paul? Just
for the Blazers' sake, or what
for
do you
the
mean?
Blazers' sake, if you had to get rid of one, if you could get rid of one, I'm saying
probably Devin Booker.
Really? Because I'm kind of a dissenter from this whole. Obviously Chris Paul. I'm not taking anything away from him, but Devin Booker is he's averaging 20. He's averaging 10 more points than Chris Paul, and he's averaging 4 assists. He's still playmaking. Chris Paul. He's obviously the facilitator, but I just kind of feel bad for Devin Booker. I feel like no one's giving him any credit. Everyone's just talking about Chris Paul.
You know what it is? Because all the years in the past they had Booker and they went nowhere. And like the bubble.
Yeah, I was just gonna say they did go 8-0 in the bubble without Chris Paul.
But that's what it is. Like Chris Paul comes, and then all of a sudden they're a 2 seed in the West when like they didn't make the playoffs last year, and like they had Booker before the bubble. So it's fair. It's fair to say that like
it is also. I mean, Ayton's developing, but I guess you're right. The stats, I think Chris Paul helps Ayton a lot, but
100%.
also Michael Bridges developed. It's complicated. I just think Devin Booker deserves a little more props.
He deserves more credit, but I think Chris Paul is still like the reason that they are where they are. And like my feelings about Chris Paul. He's literally like, I was talking yesterday on Above the Rim podcast about how like Chris Paul is the best point guard I've ever watched. Like I was born in 1994. I didn't watch John Stockton or Magic, and like you could argue Steve Nash, I guess, but I still think Chris Paul is a better point guard.
When you say that, you mean pure point guard, because obviously like Steph Curry.
Yeah. Like facilitator, floor general, shit like that.
Okay, that's fair.
Some people could say Jason Kidd, but just like the shit that Chris Paul does on the court and the way he elevates his teammates, I've never seen anything like it. And even at fucking, how old is he? 35, 34, still doing this shit, just like our boy. But yeah, Chris Paul is on another level, man. All right, Evan, we got to the end of this podcast again. I'm just going to say it for any first-time listeners. At the end of every podcast, we allow our guests to control a narrative. Doesn't have to be Melo related, doesn't have to be basketball related, doesn't have to be sports related. So I'm going to give you the floor and let you control a narrative.
Well, I'm sticking with Melo today on such a joyous Melo week.
Yeah.
And I was watching First Take this morning following Carmelo becoming the 10th all-time NBA scorer. And I was listening to Max Kellerman, who previously had a lot to say about why Carmelo wasn't in the league, too big of an ego, did not know how to adjust to the current NBA, et cetera, et cetera. And he, instead of, when Stephen A. Smith talked about how Carmelo was disrespected and blackballed from the league and it shouldn't have happened, Max Kellerman had kind of a different perspective and said, well, he deserved to be out of the league. Props to him for adjusting his game and coming back, and he's playing well now. And I give him a lot of credit for transitioning the way he did to become the player he is and become the 10th best scorer. And I think that just shows how little these people know about basketball compared to what they say, and how little they actually watch the players they're talking about. Because I assume anyone who watches this podcast watches Portland games and has watched Melo in the past. He did not change his game. He plays the same basketball he always did. He gets, for 80% of the time, he's catching the ball in the low post on the elbow. He's scoring in isolation, and he passed as much as he does now before. He rebounds the same way. They were talking about how he was like an efficient rebound. He was always an efficient. He was completely disrespected, and it just further proves that everything's a narrative. The media doesn't know what they're saying. The teams believe what the media is saying, and yeah, you got the point.
I like that. And you think about it, right? How many topics do these shows cover a day? Like 7, 8, something like that. What are the odds that Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman and Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp and all these dudes are watching every game that they're talking about? Like, it's impossible. Even if they had some sort of like condensed game where no commercials and all that shit, that's still like 2 hours, maybe an hour, 45 minutes, an hour and a half, absolute minimum. And they talk about the Blazers, then they'll talk about the Knicks, and like
they're talking about football half the time.
And they're talking about, like, you can't watch all of these things, and then they talk about baseball, and like you can't watch all of this. Like, it's impossible unless they're sleeping like literally 3 or 4 hours a night. So it's like,
and you know that it's no matter what they
like, You're
say,
lagging
hey,
a
whether
little
they're
bit.
pro
Evan.
Melo or anti Melo, they're gonna get views. It doesn't matter.
For sure. It's still lagging a little bit. It's all good.
Sorry.
It's a good point, man. Like, they can't watch all this shit. They don't know. Like, just talk about what you know. If you want to say, like, if they want to talk about, from what I see, like, Melo's doing this, or from what I see, the Knicks are doing this, like, I don't think Stephen A. Smith watches every single Knicks game, but he's the spokesperson of the Knicks through the media for whatever reason. I mean, we know what reason it is. His huge personality and things like that, but it's just annoying when people talk about things like that. And you're right. That's where the narrative starts of like, shit, people get influenced by these people who don't watch the games. And that's fans and that's teams and GMs, as we saw. Melo get blackballed for an entire year. And it's frustrating.
Yeah, I just can't believe. And until 2 years ago, you never think that general managers getting paid millions of dollars would be following the same narratives that people who don't watch the game put out.
100%.
So.
And we learned that.
Oh, we have you. So.
We saw it. Good shit, Evan. Yo, I appreciate you as always for taking time out. Was this your second or third time on?
Third time.
Third time. Good shit. Always good. Always good talking to you, man. Always good convo on the Discord as always.
Mm-hmm.
And
join up, everyone, as always.
Say that again.
Join up, everyone.
Join up.
A month. That's all you got to put in.
It's growing. I think.
Yeah, I know.
12?
Yeah, it's
12 people. So, and we still got people who signed up for like controller and baller memberships who haven't joined the Discord. So,
and
join.
Once Melo joins the Discord, everyone's gonna be pretty sorry for not signing up earlier.
We're gonna close it once Melo joins. So get the fuck in before Melo gets in.
Yeah, for real.
Yo, Evan, appreciate you, bro. Hope you have a great rest of your night, and thanks for talking during the special week for Melo.
Thanks so much for having me. Congrats, Melo.
Stay mellow, baby.